Carter. I am in Canada, close to Toronto. My daughter is 6 years old and has was born with HIE. Was in the NICU for a couple of weeks. She had a few feeding issues, she was on an IV when we went home, so lots of different experiences that way. And she has a diagnosis of level 2 cerebral palsy.
All right, I am Lynn. My husband Eric and I live right outside of Chicago in Northwest Indiana. We have a daughter, Kyla, who will turn 10 this weekend. She spent about 6 weeks in the NICU and also has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. She also has cortical visual impairment. We got a G-tube when she was about 3. She eats orally also, and she is in 4th grade right now.
Hi, my name is Nicole Carrillo. My husband and I live in Texas with our 3 children. Our middle child is our son with CP. He has HIE acquired about an hour after birth. He just stopped breathing. So it was kind of unexpected. We were in the NICU for 32 days and literally had no idea that hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy was even our diagnosis until we were getting close to discharge. We left the NICU with the G-tube. He will turn 8 at the end of this year, and we still use it primarily, but he can do some soft mashables and stuff by mouth. What else? He's in 2nd grade. He's in a gen ed class. He has a communication device, uses a wheelchair, has braces. It's been a process, but he is very happy and looking forward to sharing more of our journey with you guys.
Thank you guys for sharing. I know everyone's going to get so much awesome information from you. So we're going to start off. I'm going to show a little graphic. So this talks a little bit about cerebral palsy and a little bit about the different stages, because as we will learn today, the range is very wide, and some children with CP are ambulatory and walking, and some children utilize a wheelchair or other devices for mobility. And then there are just many variations in between. So just some other impairments that many children have that also have CP. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll just kind of go down a list of information, and then the panelists will share kind of a little bit about their journeys with these things. So there's a lot of information that will be given about equipment and different devices, and it can be overwhelming at first, but you will, a durable medical equipment or a DME provider will help you. So if Megan, Lynn, and Nicole kind of want to share what are some of the common devices that you've seen in the community, and, kind of how have you navigated that?
Sure. That was a big one for us. When we got our CP diagnosis, Kyla was 8 months. We left that appointment with scripts for lots of things. That was kind of overwhelming at first. She got a script for a Bennett hand splints, for a Bennett vest, a stander, a wheelchair, a bath seat, kind of everything at once. She now uses an activity chair at home. She also uses a communication device, and all those things were scary at first, but they were huge to help us help her, especially in the very beginning.
Yeah, my daughter is a level 2, and I think the levels just weren't showing up there, Haley. But there's different levels of cerebral palsy in different areas that it can affect your limbs. You have diplegia, hemiplegia, you have quadruplica, and I'm probably, if I'm saying it incorrect, but then you have monoplegia and you have triplegia, which all these different ways can affect either your arms or your limbs or all 4 limbs or 1 limb. So my daughter, it affects her 2 limbs in her legs. And she can walk and run. And so it's great to be on the panel with different levels of cerebral palsy, so you kind of get a glimpse of all the different levels that it can affect in ways that it can affect you. My daughter uses a wheelchair, but only for long distance walking, which always surprises folks because she'll sit in a wheelchair and then she'll get up and jump up and start walking. And I always make a joke because I think it's a learning exercise to learn that just because you see somebody in a wheelchair, you shouldn't make any assumptions of their ability. And I always find people are shocked when she stands up. So I'll be like, oh my gosh, and pretend it's the first time, just to kind of make a joke in light of it. But yeah, my daughter can walk for 20 to 30 minutes at a time and then needs to sit down in a wheelchair if there's any further walking. She also has AFOs. When she was smaller, she wore 2 AFOs on both of her legs. And she did a lot of different types of therapies and learned through therapy to release her foot on one side. So she used to walk on her tippy toes on both sides. And she actually learned through so many different types of therapies that we can talk about. And just it's completely random that she learned. It's not like, oh, the therapy will work for every child. She just ended up learning to put her foot down on one side. And so she doesn't wear AFO on one side of her leg anymore. She only wears one AFO. So that's the 2 equipment that she uses currently, is her wheelchair and AFOs.
Hi, so when Ollie was little, we started with some of our DME supplies. So we had hand splints for little babies that keep their hands fisted a lot. It was basically like a little sleeve and it just helped hold his thumb out. Then we started getting AFOs, and then we had to make decisions. So when you're further down the GMF scale, like a 4 and a 5, sometimes you have to prioritize what equipment is more important. Insurance will only provide 1 seating device. So for us, the big ticket item cost-wise was getting a wheelchair. That meant we had to utilize other resources to try to find an activity chair, because it was important for me doing like feeding therapy that we didn't sit in the same chair all day. Plus, it was very hard to clean with drips and splashes and drool. We also wanted him to have a gait trainer. So it's kind of like a walker, but it supports his body so he can focus on moving his legs. But it was also important from a standing input that he also had a stander. Insurance also will only cover 1 of those devices. So we, our family learned how to utilize kind of community resources and kind of find other equipment that children had outgrown that we still needed. That was very helpful to us. And so now we still use AFOs. We are in a manual wheelchair. We've done some power tests. So there's all kinds of support equipment. My biggest, I guess, take home for new families is the first visit we went to, I was very naive and like, okay, I got these prescriptions. I'm mentally preparing myself that my child's going to need these things. The person we're seeing is going to show us different things and talk to us about our needs and our abilities and, project our future abilities. And we walked in, it was like, we have this chair or this chair. Do you want blue or green? And I'm like, what? So kind of going in, it's very overwhelming. It's very emotional. But if you kind of take the time to go through like a medical website and kind of have an idea of what different things look like, think about, is a medical stroller better for your small child? It's more convenient. It has a big basket, but it doesn't allow any independence for the child to use it. Maybe something more like a manual wheelchair where you have a parent handle where you can still push them around, but they can still engage when they have the energy to do so. Bath chairs, there are some that sit down at the bottom of the tub. There's some that sit higher. When they're little and they're still light, it's fun to have them in the water. But as your kid gets older and bigger and, your back starts getting sore, sometimes it's nicer to have them higher so you can transfer them in and out easier. So just kind of look at what's out there, make some questions. So when you go in, you kind of have an idea of what you might like or what fits for your household or your child's needs and level of support, and then kind of base it off of that, because it's very overwhelming. And I got very discouraged when I went in and I thought they were going to kind of teach and walk me through these things. And it was basically, this is what we have, pick your color. So that's a big thing that I always try to share. Like, try to kind of look ahead of time, make a list, take pictures if you see stuff, and you can go in and specifically ask, I like this. I think this would be good for us. Can you tell me why you think this would be a good fit for my child? Or if not, what would you suggest? And that kind of opens a line of questioning. So you're not just, in and out, because the faster you're out of that appointment for them, the easier it is for the next person to come in. But you want to make sure what you're picking works for you, because insurance wise, you usually will have to keep that piece of equipment for 5 years. So
That's such a great point, Nicole, if I may add. So in Canada, there's lots of different charity groups. And we actually, to get the wheelchair, my insurance did not cover all of it, or even, I think it only covered half. And so for new families, just thinking about what are other ways to find funding for these equipments is such an important point. So thank you, Nicole, for reminding me to speak about that, because we need to look at if you have any groups that do, we have groups that specifically do funding for cerebral palsy, and even applying for some of those charity groups takes huge amount of time and effort in applications, in medical notes. But we did have the Cerebral Palsy Association help us pay for the wheelchair. We also obviously had to pay some of it ourselves, and insurance and other organizations. So wheelchairs are extremely expensive. So definitely look at all different ways you can fund a wheelchair, and don't feel, overwhelmed with the fact that you have to pay for, $8,000 wheelchair yourself. There's many organizations might give you 500 here, 1,000 there, and it kind of adds up. So I think that's an important point. Also just thinking about the overwhelmness for new families of, oh, I just got the CP diagnosis. And I remember thinking I got to go get a new house, and all of those things, so that my daughter can get a ramp to go up into her house, and all of those things. Try to just think of one step at a time. What is the need today? And don't get lost in the, oh, what's our long-term plan? Because it can be extremely overwhelming, and you have no idea how your child may develop at an early stage of a CP diagnosis. So just think about, what do you need today, or this month, or this year for the child's development, to try to kind of help with that overwhelming feeling.
You guys so much for sharing. All right, so next, this sort of leads into our next topic, which is talking about different therapies, especially occupational and physical therapy. So one of the things, if y'all could share about, is just, we talked about in our planning groups that this diagnosis of CP will usually come with a prescription for outpatient and physical and occupational therapy, and just how adding, that occupational and physical therapy also comes with a lot of things, because time-wise, financial burdens, things like that. So if any of y'all want to share, and then also we talked about, related to that, just it's a big commitment for the whole family unit, giving your family the time to adjust to this, and then also just being aware of the cost, because even when you have insurance, there's usually a max out of pocket. And again, every insurance plan, we know we have international families here, all of that is different, but in general, those are pieces of the journey that, affect kind of your decision making. And then, having wait lists, and then just a little bit about early intervention and how, if that's available to you, that can be a good resource. So if y'all would love to just kind of elaborate on that, that would be amazing.
So after being discharged after 32 days, we did not have a CP diagnosis. We didn't get our official CP diagnosis until my son was 18 months, and it was just general CP. And then it wasn't until he turned 2 that he got his type of CP diagnosis. My takeaway for that is it's never too early to start early intervention. So we live in Texas, and it's through the county that you live in. It's called Early Childhood Intervention, so you can just search for it. It's provided on a sliding scale budget, so it's usually very affordable for families. but you don't need to have certain diagnoses to request for them to come out and do an evaluation. There are certain things that they're looking to see in an infant if they're behind or delayed in, and then they will decide how much occupational or physical therapy or even feeding therapy you need. And that's a great way to start. We did that for a while and then switched to an outpatient physical, occupational, and speech therapist just because I felt like it was more hands-on. But I was the mom that wanted to make sure we were doing everything and really filled as much therapy time as I could. Financially, it was a burden. It was very hard on our family, my work schedule. It just almost was like a burnout. And I didn't understand at the time that people kind of grieved and processed differently. So me and my husband were on different pages. I was almost in this thing like, I'm going to make him better. We just have to work hard and do as much as we can, and we're going to catch up. And my husband was kind of took a little bit longer and, wanted to give him time. And he was a baby. But one thing that I've learned looking back is there's not a cure for cerebral palsy. I think getting a good start with therapy and just doing as much financially as you're comfortable with, that your family as a whole can take on. We did intensives and he did gain some skills, but by no way did he, catch up. It wasn't a cure. For a while, you kind of see these things that are small bills add up, and then these amounts of money that you are, just ridiculous. Like, it's a lifelong need. And so kind of pacing, and I'm not saying don't do anything. Do what's comfortable for your family dynamic, keep working on skills. But what I've learned in this journey is you're not going to therapy for that hour a week and making progress. You are going with your child and you are learning the skills to help continue those things every day. So when you're there, don't be afraid to ask your occupational therapist for a specific need. Hey, this week we need to work on bridging so I can do better diaper changes. We need help brushing teeth, like very specific goals that you have them help you. We did a lot of rolling and manipulatives, and I would have the physical therapist guide me with my hands to learn how she was doing the certain techniques that worked for my child, so I could go home and do them every day, because that's where you're really going to make the progress, doing those skills. And you can make them fun at home. My other children have to go to therapy and sit, on the side and watch, and then they get very excited. Oh, but he gets to play. Why can't I play? I'm at the gym and I see all these fun things and yoga balls. And so there's a way that you can incorporate your family so you make it fun, but it's that skill that you're practicing, that you're learning from your therapist, but you're going home and you're doing the work every day with your child.
Sure, so I think Nicole put it best, but like the therapy part is so important. In Canada, we have like something called From Sick Kids. Everybody probably knows Sick Kids Hospital, even in the US. They will transfer you to Grandview Kids, which is kind of like an organization that helps with all of the speech and the therapy and the occupational therapy, and they do all that until your child goes to school. So my daughter actually has been discharged from most of those therapies. But it's such a great organization for new families to learn and hear about, because they do all of that kind of combined in one building. But I know as a new parent, you're also like researching and thinking about what other therapies can I pay for? What can I work and try to do outside of the therapies? And there's so many different things you're going to read about and Google about of things that people have tried. And I know Lynn can talk about some of that as well. But one of the therapies we did was called the Nat Daniel method, and it actually comes from the US. And there's only like 5 or 6 Canadians that actually know how to do this method. And it's similar to something called like movement therapy, where you're just doing the same movement over and over and over again. And so, differently to Nicole, this therapy was very intense and not parent driven, very focused on the child physically learning something. And so my daughter would cry, and it was rough and it's hard, but I don't regret doing it, because I mean, I can only speak from my experience that I believe that therapy is what helped her and on her one foot, put her foot down. So you can imagine years and years of doing the same movement, and what she got from that was to learn to put her foot down. So these therapies are, they're intense, and sometimes we would stop doing them. And to Nicole's point too, like, it's important to do the therapy, but then also know when your child needs a break, because it's very hard on them. And it's hard on the family unit to constantly go to different types of therapy. So on top of doing ABM therapy, we're doing physiotherapy, we're doing speech therapy, there's literally an appointment all the time. And I remember as a new family thinking this is too much and we need to take a break, and we would. And so I just wanted to stress the importance of doing the therapies and hoping that they work, but also the importance of taking a break when your child needs it and when you need it as a parent. You need to take those breaks as well, because the therapy is always going to be there. Whether they're 6 months or, they're 10 years old, you're going to be doing the therapy. So it's okay to take a break. But yeah, I think, also you need to find the therapies that work for your child. We definitely tried some other things that just weren't working and weren't cohesive to my daughter. Mental health, like, is huge too, right? Like, I'm not gonna sit in a therapy and watch her be upset for an hour over hours, right? So sometimes you try something and it doesn't work, and you try something different. But definitely, like, do your research, and look at the scientific proof of some of these therapies. There's so many different things out there, and you can definitely get overwhelmed. So talk to a doctor for sure about what they recommend, and if you decide to do some things outside of that, like, my advice is definitely look into the scientific evidence of that therapy or that thing that you're going to try.
We had a very similar experience to Nicole when Kyla got out of the NICU. We started with early intervention. It's called First Steps here in Indiana. She did OT, PT, speech, so feeding therapy, and vision through First Steps. We also, just like Nicole, added on clinic appointments. We wanted to have that set up for when she aged out of early intervention, because sometimes that can take a while to establish. Just like Megan said, it's all about the balance. We tried everything. We've done experimental things in other countries we fundraised for. We've done intensives, lots of things. And you do expense, like Nicole said, and also just the balance. You have to find out what works for your family, and like Megan said, not feel guilty for taking a break when you need it, because therapy will always be there. Even in school now, Kyla gets OT, PT, speech, and vision, and they're amazing, helping with her goals at school. So yeah, just feel whatever works best for you, and also what provider works best for you. We went through several providers that weren't a great fit for Kyla. And you can't feel bad to move on to the next one if they don't work for you for whatever reason. Especially in early intervention, we had to go through several that just weren't a great fit for us. They could be for somebody else. So don't feel bad to kind of move on to the next one if it's not for you.
Thank you guys so much for sharing on that one. I know that was a lot of great information, and I'm just going to touch on a couple of things you sort of already talked about, but just to kind of as a reminder, just that this is a marathon journey and not a sprint. I know when we did our meetings to, collaborate for this, we talked about that a lot of this is a very long journey and it's a lifelong journey, and kind of like everything y'all have already shared about, you have to do it at the pace that works for your family and reevaluate whenever needed and change course whenever needed. And this is overwhelming. And so it's okay that it feels overwhelming, because, you start this journey and then you have the DME and you have the equipment and then you have the different therapies and then you have the providers. And then, now after the pandemic, there's a lot of wait lists to get into therapy clinics. And then on top of that, if you need to switch providers or you need to find a different provider. And so just, give yourself some grace during that. And as you navigate this, because it's going to be ever changing and ever adapting. And then I know y'all shared about this, so if anyone wants to share more about just that, cerebral palsy will look different for every child. And just like HIE, there's kind of no one size fits all. And just each day and each situation can affect your child's CP more or less. And just trying to have as much flexibility. So if anyone kind of wants to share on how you've navigated that.
So when we talk about the GMF CS, we're talking about the classification scale. So if you get a lower number like a 1 or 2, that's usually less severe and they have more independence. When you move down the scale, a bigger number usually means more support. So a 4 or a 5. So when my son was small, we got into a clinical trial and it was dependent on what level you were at. We had to travel all the way across the country. Anyway, it's hard watching your child go through these ranks, and as a parent, getting very getting caught up on the number sometimes of like, oh my goodness, they told me my son was a 4, maybe a 5, what does that look for? Try looking at their abilities and just using that as a tool. I'm like, okay, well, if we're further down the scale, that just means we're going to need more equipment support. We're going to need more XYZ. Like we learned with HIE, it's a scale. And even though your child may have a similar number or even a similar birth story as another child, they will still look different. A quote that I've learned in this group was, comparison is the thief of joy. And it couldn't be more true. So we will see all types of kids and families, and it's really hard not to look and say, well, wow, you guys are here and we're still over here. But remembering that it's a journey, and that just means you're going to need more support. And so you can kind of lean into the community to help best fit that. So I wouldn't get caught up on the number. Just remember it's a tool, and that'll just kind of use as an indicator as how much other things you will need in the journey.
And remember too, the CP diagnosis, I know we've said it, doesn't change anything for your child. It doesn't change what your child's going to do, what they're going to accomplish. If anything, it lets you have more services, sometimes more resources, different charities, like everyone said. And also like Nicole said, that number, can change that scale. Kyla is more severely affected, but she is amazing in her walker, which was kind of unexpected for even her therapy team. She's got to use it really, really well. She can't really roll over. She can't sit, crawl, none of those things, but she can run around her school in her walker and do, whatever she wants, go whichever way, she wants to go, and be sneaky in that thing. So sometimes they really surprise you too, because we didn't, know that would be something she could do in the beginning. She kind of just sat there in it, and we got her a different one that worked better for her, and she took off. So yeah, they'll surprise you too.
Yeah, I would say from a child that's not as affected, like visibly, people look at my daughter and say, I don't see anything, a disability there. So I think like her, especially at her age now, there's a strong talking in mirrors and saying you are doing great and you are doing the best you can, because there is that part now at 6 years old where how come I can't run as fast as the other kids, and how come I can't play tag. So I actually wrote a children's book for my daughter's school to give to them about playing tag, because it's actually extremely difficult to describe why my daughter can't play tag. She will never win in this game of tag, right? So I think it's just about in our situation, it's about advocating that it's visibly, because my daughter doesn't have a wheelchair at school, people actually look at her and don't see her a disability until you're trying to do something. Going up the stairs can be difficult for her, and 6 years old and 7 years old, there's a lot of catch me if you can, and so there's a lot of tears. And so I think my thing as a parent right now is building her up and building her mentality that she is doing the best she can. Every day I say, you're doing the best you can with the abilities that you have. And so I think I think I wish I started that earlier, you know, when she was younger, and just keep telling her you're doing the best you can when you're playing tag, or if you don't want to play tag, that's okay too. So I think there's a lot of self-motivation that's happening now that I wanted to just briefly touch on, that is so important to her, building herself and her confidence up is something I'm really focusing on right now, more than how can I get you to where those kids are. Now it's you are where you are, and how do you build yourself and be advocating for yourself.
I love that. And that kind of went into the next topic that we were going to talk about, is just advocating for your child, and how, you know, here at Hope for HIE, that's what we're here to do, is help support you while you advocate for your child, and just to be a place for you to find support while you're navigating your HIE and CP journey and all the many journeys. So, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about just the resources you can use to help yourself while you're navigating. And I know y'all had touched a little bit about in our meetings about respite, nursing, your extended family, your support network. So if y'all just want to share a little bit about how you advocate for your child, and also how you find that support for yourself, and where you look for that in the Hope for HIE community, and also in your personal community.
Yeah, I think the Hope for HIE community is obviously a great place to start. I think all of us have made friends when our kids were little that had, you know, similar experiences, and we still reach out to them. Kyla will be 10 this weekend, and they're still my go-to for things. They know more than the doctor sometimes. They, you know, have the same experience as us. Here in the States, we also have waivers. So every state is different. We got Kyla on a waiver when she was about 18 months. So she gets Medicaid because of that. So that allows us, like Haley said, for respite. It's really hard. She's supposed to get nursing and respite, but, you know, since the pandemic, it's really hard to find those things staffed, of course. But yeah, Medicaid helps with different bills. I know Nicole was talking about the expenses of equipment and things like that. So Medicaid can help offset that. And like we said earlier, charities, and even different local groups too. We don't have a local HIE big population where I live, but we have a complex child group that someone started a couple years ago, and we meet once a week for coffee. Whoever can come, we do nights out. Just having a different group locally that can relate to having a complex child is a huge kind of lifeline for other parents too, locally for me.
Yeah, for us, I was telling some parents, like, even just on like a very small scale, when I see another child that's wearing AFOs, I always point her out to my daughter and to the parent, and I'm like, look, so they can understand that there's different people with disabilities all around us and in our communities, because you might not see them as much. But yeah, I think we talked about some of the charities. There's so many different charity groups in Canada that help with cerebral palsy and kids with disabilities, but you got to put in the time. You got to have some time, because those applications can take a long time to fill out. But I'll tell you, I have gotten a few charities help. I have one charity that donated to help my daughter do dance lessons, so they pay for her dance lessons. Like I said, I had a charity help pay for her wheelchair, and so there is there is money out there. But I think the biggest one for anyone that's in Canada is called the disability tax credit, and it's funded through the government. And so you get a doctor's note, you fill out various paperwork, and then you get it for 10 years. So the process to get it is long, but it's a solid 10 years of getting help from the government, and you get that monthly, and it depends on your income and all these other factors. But definitely, I would encourage everyone to look out for the disability tax credit if they have a diagnosis of CP. But I do want to say some places in Canada don't diagnose until the child is 2. So the good part about the disability tax credit is they backtrack to birth. So once you get approved, they'll pay you back all the way to birth. So when I got approved when my daughter was 3, I got 3 years worth of payments at once, and that helped us pay for so many different things that we had to do, especially all the different speech and OT and all those things that we have to pay for. But yeah, those are just some of the things that come off my mind that can help anyone.
We talk about advocating for your child, and I want to emphasize in the beginning, I felt like that first year is really stressful. It's okay if you don't want to talk about it. And it's okay if people ask you questions and you're not comfortable answering them, because it is your life, your child's medical, diagnoses, and it's very personal to you. But I feel like that first year you're struggling so much trying to get footing and establish your routine and all the care support, that as it gets older and you continue along that path, you will naturally find ways to advocate, even without, I guess, realizing you're doing it. The first time my son got his gait trainer, we were all excited to take him to a neighborhood park that was wheelchair accessible. It's fully ramped. We were so thrilled. And we get him out there and he's, trying to learn it and move around. And these kids, they're little kids, they don't know. They run over and they're looking at him and they look at me and said, "What's wrong with him?" And I mean, it just gets you in the heart. And you look at him and you're like, looked at him and I looked at them and I said, "There's nothing wrong with him." And then the kid looks again and he looks and he's like, "Well, what's that?" And he's pointing at his gait trainer. And I said, "Oh, that just helps him walk." "Oh, okay. How cool. Can I touch it?" And that was it. But we always, I think that perspective is like very defensive and scared. And sometimes it's just small. To me, it's way easier to do that than with an adult, because we get the "don't touch him, you'll hurt him." I'm like, he's not contagious. It's just CP. You can't catch it. So using small opportunities sometimes too, even on a one-to-one, can make a really big difference. So that's my on advocacy. And then as you move into your school, learning how to do your ARDS, admission, review, and dismissal meetings. Those are very overwhelming, but you will learn to advocate the most and the loudest for your child during those. Why does your child need what they need? So I mentioned earlier that my son's in a general education classroom. He started in a self-contained class when he was 3. And then as he showed that he had a lot more abilities and cognitively was on level with his peers, we kind of moved into a blended class where he was still within a room with children with disabilities, but they also had neurotypical children. And then as we moved into kinder, he moved into a general education class. However, we still had his nurse go to school with him. This year, somehow we lucked out and he goes to school with his nurse to provide all of his medical care. And the school also provides a one-to-one to give him all of his educational support, which is great. It's kind of unheard of to have both, but we are very thrilled and we're not going to rock the boat on that one. Finding the support for your family is also important. It's very easy to get almost laser focused on your child and all their needs and trying to make sure you're doing absolutely the most that you can all the time, but there'll be burnout. You guys will be exhausted and tired, and sometimes asking, why do we keep going? Will 1 week make a big difference? That's where leaning in. We don't have family around us, so we have found there are different things in the community that just work better for us, and not being afraid to ask or kind of advocate when you go into the community on why your child needs certain things. So for us, sometimes that was using community pools. We used to use like a special flotation device that was not allowed. So having to advocate why your child needed what everyone else saw as a floaty. I'm like, it's not a floaty. He can't, we have aspiration risk and we have to keep our head out of the water. So sometimes that can feel exhausting, but it's worth the effort. We have to remember that they're kids too, and they want to have fun and they want to be included and they want to be loved. And you will find so many ways just to get them included, however it looks for them. We haven't touched on yet is a lot of churches will offer respite care. And there are some special need camps in Texas. They start at kind of year 7. So my son's 7 this summer. We were scared to do a sleepaway camp, but we did do a family camp, and it was all for children with cerebral palsy. We went to a campground that was all wheelchair accessible. He got to go on a zip line. He got to do a high ropes course side by side with his brother. He got to do rock wall climbing. And even though it took longer, they had special harnesses and stuff to help him up the wall. And at the end of it, all of my kids were, I mean, ecstatic that they got to go to camp. And then we were reassured that we were there in case something happened. But it was a nice learning experience. And I feel encouraged almost maybe next year to do a day camp and then, you know, slowly kind of tread the waters. There are also a lot of resources through, I think, social media and finding local support. Like I said, I don't have a lot of family around here. And I feel as we kind of further in the journey, sometimes people don't know how to include your family. And so they don't make that effort. And that can be very hurtful. Finding local moms that have special needs children, usually regardless of what their child's special needs ability is very, like, I don't know, it's just very cathartic having families and these women that just understand your journey and don't question. They include you. They want to talk to you. You can talk about therapy and sharing doctor information, and people check in on you after having surgery or hospitalizations. And these are the ladies that you're not afraid to tell them actually how you're feeling and what you're going through. And having that, I think, local resource or that net is very comforting. And then it's also good where you can ask for support within your community, your nonprofits, any kind of events that might be coming up, things that they have found that works for their family, wheelchair accessible parks, all kinds of stuff. But I do feel if you just go in your search engine, like say on Facebook, and you type in your area and just type in special needs or cerebral palsy, and you'll find these groups. And if there's not one, maybe you can start one and just kind of slowly start growing it. But I do think that those are things to look into when you feel that you guys are stable and want that support. Then that's a good time to kind of start growing. Somebody touched earlier on disability and waivers. I can't stress enough, add your child to the waiver as early as you can, as early as you find out. Search whatever state you're in, what waivers are available. Even if you think your child maybe is kind of iffy if they qualify, add them to the wait list. We are in Texas, and some of those wait lists are over 10 years. It's ridiculous. The earlier you get on the wait list, the earlier you can get to the top. Once you get to the top, then they will review and they will give you an idea if you qualify and if you don't. But at least you had that chance. Yeah, I can't stress it enough. Like once you get on a waiver, you'll usually get a Medicaid as a secondary, at least in the United States, and that will provide you a lot of financial resources as well.
And that was kind of the last thing I was going to have y'all touch on. So Lynn or Megan, if you want to add, was just advocating for your child, and then just the burnout, the parent guilt, you know, how you deal with that, self-care, hobbies, and that kind of thing will be kind of our last topic before we open for questions.
Yeah, I think for us, like advocacy is, and I touched on it a little bit, but it's huge. Like from birth until now, we're always advocating for our daughter. And some of the things Nicole said we do as well. Like if I sign her up for a camp, I'm like, is this camp had to have children with disabilities? Is Maya, my daughter, your first one? Sometimes she is. And so you have to tell them what the needs are. You have to be specific. I think a lot of times I'm there, you know, even correcting language. The other day I had to correct someone's language when they said, you know, Maya's going to be behind in school. Why? Right? So I think there's a lot of advocacy. I started a Instagram for her, probably with like my own healing of like understanding disability, but it's created such an amazing look for parents and other people to understand that cerebral palsy can look all different types of ways. There's all different types of levels, and let's not make an assumption. So I think every single day I'm advocating for my daughter, and I feel like I'm trying now, like I said, I'm teaching her to gain some of that advocacy for herself, because we do need to teach them to advocate eventually, if they can, of course. And I will never stop advocating for her to be included. I think that's a big part. Nicole talked about rock climbing. My daughter went to rock climbing camp and rock climbed. And I will always say, and I don't think I'm saying anything wrong, you're rock climbing with CP. and that makes you incredible, right? So we just have to keep pushing, you know, those boundaries and pushing the children to do the best that they can with the abilities that they have. And I'm a strong advocate for I'm going to include you in every single possible thing that you feel physically you can do, and you're going to do that to the ability that you can. And so
you cut off.
she's done dance and swimming and just trying to do all the things. Oh, yeah. So I just think, yeah. And then, just advocating for her in all of the different after school activities and camps is huge. And I think for the self-care part is definitely, like I said earlier, like taking breaks from that advocacy and just being a kid. That's just a kid here and we're having fun is huge. And also like taking care of your own self as a parent, you know, whatever that is, maybe go get a massage. My husband is a massage therapist, so we're big advocates for for that type of self-care, taking care of yourself physically. I always say you can't be the caregiver if you burnt out, right? How are you going to care for your child if you burn out? So those things are really important as well. I wanted to mention really quickly, one of the charities that my coworker applied my daughter to. So advocating with your coworkers, telling your story if you feel comfortable. My daughter is aware, you know, that I can tell her story. She can tell me, no, I don't want to, or yes, I do. She's all about, let's talk about it. Let's bring it out there. My coworker nominated my daughter a charity called $1 Million Smiles, and they build playhouses for kids with disabilities. And so my daughter has a giant playhouse in the backyard, which probably costs thousands of dollars, that somebody just nominated her for and put her name in because of our story, because we're advocating for them, and had nothing to do with me, but the work that we're doing to remind, you know, that our children are here and they want to play and they want to be part of whatever, you know, to the best of their abilities. So there's so many great charities, but I wanted to shout them out because they do that type of work, and there's so many different ones for sure.
And I think to go along with what Haley said about, you know, self-care and burnout, none of us really expected to be caregivers. We thought we were going to be parents, and now we're also caregivers. And like she said earlier, it's a marathon. So taking accessing whatever you can as far as respite. It's scary. We got it when Kyla was about 18 months old. It's not perfect. There's wait lists for nursing. We get, you know, CNAs, home health aides, that sort of thing. Just get on the wait list, do what you can. We even hire, you know, local babysitters that are maybe college kids or family. I know not everyone has family locally, but whatever you can do. We found an amazing resource here. It's called A Rosy Place for Children, and it is basically an overnight kind of camp. It's listed technically as a hospital. They have nurses, aides, but Kyla goes there for 3 or 4 days at a time. And we didn't do it till this year. We waited till she was 9 because we were scared. And she loves it. It's her favorite place ever. She can't wait to go back. Like we thought with how high needs she was, kind of how she's an only child, she's, you know, picky, she needs to be entertained. We thought, you know, she might not love it, and she has the best time ever. And that allows us to have a few days that we've never had before, you know, doing things, and we could have been accessing that this whole time. So just don't be shy to get on those wait lists, ask, you know, people for different resources. As far as caregivers, sometimes, you know, you'll find somebody that has experience, a nurse that, you know, just wants to help for date nights or things like that. Just don't put it off, because time goes by and the burnout it's so real for all of us.
And I want to thank you guys so much for sharing with everybody today. I know that I speak for all these families that are here today and all the families in our community and outside of our community that are going to see this video in the future, that you've shared some amazing, wonderful information today that just helps bring communities together and just provide people with the support that they need during this journey. So